Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and this Python tutorial series. I'm Aditya. In the last video, we saw what are Python classes and objects and we saw how to create them. In this video, we are going to see the concept of inheritance and access modifiers. So it will somewhat cover the concept of inheritance, abstraction and encapsulation. So without any further ado, let's begin. So, okay, we have these two objects, EMP and EMP2, where we can just use them to access the methods. Now, let's first understand what are public, private, and protected variables and also functions. So, ideally, in object-oriented programming, public variables are accessed by anywhere from the class and outside of the class. Okay. Protected variables, on the other hand, are only accessed by the class, inside the class, and all other classes which are deriving this class. So for instance, suppose an employee, suppose we make salary as protected, it can be accessed anywhere in the employee, but it also can be accessed from other classes, let's say manager class, which is inheriting the employee class. It can also access the salary method. Then what is private? So private is all the variables and functions which are only accessed within the scope or inside of that class. So suppose if we make id as private, you can only access id within this scope. You cannot access id over here even after you create that class. So what's the use of this actually, and why did I say that it's ideally, and why did I say like it's not in Python as well? So in Python, there is like no boundaries. Like if you see in other programming languages like Java or C++ or even PHP or even any other language which strictly follows object-oriented programming rules, there you cannot print private variables as per the conventions outside of the class. So how does Python make sure that private variables are not accessed outside the class? We will come to that, but let's first see the public and protected. So by default, all the variables and functions in a class are public. Okay, so we don't have to do anything to specify the variable as public. It's by default public in Python. So how to specify the variable as protected? Very simple. Suppose if I want to make this salary as protected, so what I will do, I will just put one underscore before it, and wherever I'm using salary, so I'm using salary over here as well, so I'll just do this. Yeah, so we are using salary here, we are using salary here, and we are using salary here as well. So now if I want to access this salary, I can access it within the class and from the classes which are inheriting the class. However, ideally, or rather, I shouldn't access this salary from outside of the class. So suppose if I do something like emp, so let's say print emp dot salary, because this is protected. And now if I run this code, oops, here, it still shows me salary of this emp. Ideally, this shouldn't be allowed. So how to access these variables and how to set values for this variable outside of the class? Well, it's pretty simple. You use something known as getters and setters that we saw in the last video. So getters, just to give a quick revision, getters are something which returns the value and setters are something which sets the value. So these are nothing but the functions only. So as we already have these two, so if I want to get it correctly, like according to the conventions of object-oriented programming, I just have to say get salary like this. Get salary. And then this is the correct way to get the salary. Okay. It goes same with private variables. So now let's go with ID. So if I make ID private, all I need to do is put double quotes like this, double underscores. So now if I remove this from here and if I do underscore ID, this is going to be very interesting. So if I run this, it throws me an error. It says employee object has no attribute underscore ID. So you must be thinking that this is because we defined it as private. That's why it's not like it's following the rules. Like I said, whatever, it wasn't right. Actually, it's not because we defined it private. This is something in Python known as mangling. So let me show you a screen from Wikipedia which describes this better, and I'll just grab it over here this way. Yep. The way, actually, like a legit way to define variables in Python as private, they will be mangled. Okay. But however, if we put another underscore in front of them, or if we just write something before them, they won't be mangled. Okay. So let's see now how to print that ID, or how it gets printed if I want to print it. So I'll just minimize this, go back over here, and then all I need to do is just need to write one underscore, because mangling starts when you put two underscores, and I need to write employee. So the employee class and its ID with a dot like this. So now if I run this code, oh sorry, it should be without dot. So now if I run this code, it shows me the ID. Okay. So what's happening here, when I put this underscore employee, that Python, when it runs, like when it compiles code and when it runs, it treats it like a normal convention. It doesn't mangles with it. So that's the basic like difference, like how Python makes variables private as compared to other languages. So it's kind of saying that it uses the mangling to make sure that private variables are not accessed outside of the scope, and they are according to the rules of our object-oriented programming. Now let's look to the other concept, which is inheritance. So what is inheritance? To give a quick revision that what we covered in the last, or the couple of the last to last video, inheritance is nothing but reusing the code from the parent, or reusing the functionalities of the parent. Okay, so let's create another class. So I'll just remove this for now, and let's go over here. I'll create another class. I will name this class as manager. So let's create manager.py. Okay, now let's create class manager. Okay, and if we don't want to write anything in the class or in the function, and we want to keep it empty, generally in other programming languages there are curly braces, but in Python you write the word class. So this means that you can keep it blank and there won't be any error, like you don't have to write anything inside it if you don't want to. Now, how to inherit this manager class, or how to make it inherit from the employee class? Well, it's pretty simple. After the class name and before the colon, you just put round brackets like this, and you write the name of the class that you want to inherit. So I will say employee. Okay. Now, if you see, this class is showing me an error or warning that it's not defined. Why it is so? Because our employee class is in employee.py, which is a different file. Our manager.py is a different file. So how to connect these two, or how to use that employee class in this? In this case, we use functionality of Python, which is known as import. So import is nothing but you use it to import modules or libraries or other classes or other files into your this main file. So how to do that? Very simple. You just write from. If I want to import it from employee, so I'll write the name of that file plus first employee, and I don't have to write .py. I will just write the name of the file as it is, employee, and I will say import from employee, import. So from this employee file, I want this employee class. So if I say employee, because in this employee.py our class name is employee, so I want to import the entire class. So I will say from employee, import employee. Now you see the error has gone. Okay. Now what if I run this code? Will it work? So let's just run the manager.py. So if I say Python manager.py, it does nothing, right? It runs properly. So let's create the object of this code. So for this class, so I will say m1, which is first manager, and or manager1, you can give any variable again, and I will write the name of the class manager. Manager if you notice that I haven't written any constructor over here as I have written in employee. As I said, like constructor is necessary and it's the first function that gets called in a class. So I haven't written it over here. So by default, this manager will inherit this employee constructor as well, print details and all the functionalities we want, it will inherit. So let's see what happens if we run this code. So now it is throwing an error. It is saying that we didn't pass the required arguments. So we need to pass name, ID, salary, and role. So we just need to follow the same conventions that we've used for this employee class. So if we just copy this and paste it over here and just say role as manager because it's a manager class. So now if I run this code now, it runs properly. So if I want to use the function of say get salary, so how can I do it? I will say m1 dot get salary. Sorry, get salary. And if I print this, let's say print, and let's do our statement as salary of manager is, and let's put it like this. Okay. So yeah, we're missing a code. Oh, sorry, over here. Yes. Now let's run this and see what happens. So you will see I'm using the function defined in employee class over here, which returns a salary, and I'm just using it in a statement. So this is how this is like the core concept of inheritance actually, that you reuse the code and you don't have to write it again and again and again. Okay. Now you'll say the manager is just one thing we are changing here. We are just changing the role and we are doing nothing different. So what's the use of this class then? What's to do? Why to do such things? Like in that case, we need to create separate class for each role. Actually, not ideally. If you remember in the slides, I said that the ideal way, or generally you create a child class once you have certain common functionalities with another parent class and also its own attributes, like the child class has its own attribute. So let's take an example here. So suppose this child class, I'll remove this pass. This child class has its own constructor. So if I say init, and let's just remove this because we will come to this concept again, but we'll just remove this. It's just the tab 19. So now if I do like this, and now if I save this, and if I just come here and say pass like this, because I don't want to write anything inside that constructor, and if I run this, you see it gives me an error. This is because even though we are inheriting the parent class, but once we write constructor like this init or this constructor is overriding the parent class. Okay, so how to then use parents class constructor as well and add the functionality of the child class as well. So in that case, we use something known as super. So we will say super and then bracket, and then if you see it takes the name of the class, but in this case we don't need to provide the name of the class. Why? Because we are just inheriting one class, and then here we will say init and the details that are being provided. So if I just run this code, let's see what happens. It still throws me an error. So I need to provide details over here. So if I just remove this, or rather let's just remove this again. So now I have the constructor of manager. Now if I run this, it throws an error. It says manager has no attribute salary. So if I say the salary, like say self dot, and as its protected variable, if I do salary equal to say 2000, and now if I run this code, let's see what happens. It shows me the salary of 2000, but I haven't passed anything over here. So why this constructor is taking the value of salary from here? This is because this constructor is overridden by this constructor. To show you, I'll just write over here again, name, ID, role, salary. And So just let's copy this, copy this over here, and let's switch this from salary, and let's do this role. Now if I run this, let's see what happens. So it still shows salary as 2000 like it, and here it's 20,000. Now if I do it 1000 like this, let's see if we get salary as 1000. Yes, we are getting salary of 1000. This is because we have uncommented this line, and this constructor is being overwritten by the parents constructor, or the child constructor is overwriting the parent constructor. So if I just uncomment this line, and now if I run this, it will throw me an error. Why? Because we need to pass these arguments, whatever we have received in this constructor. It still shows me 1000. Why? Because this salary is getting assigned before we assign our new value in that constructor. So if I switch the order like this, and now if I run this, it will show me 2000. So that's why the order is important. So suppose if you want to assign certain variables but want to change in the child class, then you just need to be careful of that order. Now suppose in this case the role of the manager is going to be manager. So in that case I don't want to pass any role in this. So what I will do, I will just remove the role from here, also from here, and here I can just say manager. Oops, like this, manager, and we can uncomment this salary for now, and let's see what happens. So it works fine without any error. So that's how you can like modify the class, like the child class, and also not just the manager, like also not just the removing some constructor, but you can add extra variables. Like suppose if I want to add say for the team ID, suppose only manager has the team ID, so we don't need it over here. Let's take it something like team ID. Then pretty simple, all we need to do is just go over here and do self dot team underscore id equal to team id, and here we have to just pass after salary some team id like this. And now if I print this team id, so salary of manager is, instead of salary, let's say team id of manager is, and let's get the team id. This will work properly. If I run this, it shows me the team id. So this is how you can like modify the class. Suppose if in this it has get salary, so suppose here if I write def get salary, and instead of super dot get salary, now you could see it's automatically deriving the employee's salary. What I could say is, I want to say that manager salary should be, actually it should be just like that. I want to say that manager salary should be self dot salary like this is multiplied by 100 or maybe 10. Let's be genuine. So now if I run this, do like this. Now if I run this again, let's see what we get. So if here I will do, let's do 1000, and now let's run this. It shows 1000 into 10, 10,000. So we have overwritten this get salary function for the child class. This is polymorphism. Like one thing has, like in this case, the function has different forms. Now the next thing to do is to take it forward and make this application more functional, or make it more functioning. So in the next video, we will continue from here and make it more functioning by adding extra functionalities. So till the next video, goodbye.